Jeff, I need you to help us first because this funding freeze has been changing and evolving all day long. Here we are, 11:04 Eastern. Where are things now?
Well, I think the latest stuff is that it's been put on hold by a judge, and that will sort of roil things for the Trump administration for at least a few days while they deal with that. But in general, it was a day of chaos and questions. And that was exemplified in the White House press briefing by Caroline Leavitt when she wasn't at first able to answer whether or not the freeze would have an impact on Medicaid. The OMB memo that was put out ended up saying that that would not have an impact. But of course, you had Democratic senators that Garrett was just talking about in his piece that are saying that there were impacts in places where the administration and the Office of Management and Budget said were not going to take place. So lots of questions, but in terms of state of play, right now it's on hold, and we'll have to see what happens next.
David Jolly, the White House knew that judges would block this. What's going on here?
I don't think they did, actually.
Stop it.
No, I don't think they did. First of all, this is spending that was approved by Mike Johnson's Republican House last year.
So what are they saying
This
tonight?
is Republican spending. Well, they're falling in line with Donald Trump. But what Donald Trump did that broke the law and violated the Constitution is that it was how he justified it. This is very much akin to the Muslim ban, when he said, we're going to ban all Muslims in the country. He got the constitutional reasons wrong. So what the president has to do is he has to faithfully execute the laws. And under the Impoundment Act, he has to spend the money that Congress has appropriated. And in this case, he said, I'm not going to do that. Well, the only reasons he's not allowed to do that, they're very narrowly tailored. The closest one to what he's trying to do is to capture efficiencies. But even then, you have to notify Congress that you're rescinding funds, or you have to notify Congress that you're pausing funds. He didn't do any of that. And this is not about efficiency, because in the OMB declaration, he said it's about wokeism, it's about Marxism, it's about gender ideology. All of those reasons violate the Impoundment Act of 1974, and they violate the constitutional responsibility of the president to take care that the laws of the country are faithfully executed. Donald Trump broke the law in doing this, and he did it through an OMB directive without an OMB director. He hasn't been confirmed yet.
David Drucker, explain this to me. Donald Trump, this was the plan, right? They have had this planned out for months and months. So why is it playing out like this in this barrage of chaos?
Well, I don't really know that it's a barrage of chaos. The president issued an executive order. He gave his White House a directive, and they followed it. I think the question is, will Congress do anything about it? And the answer is probably no, because over the last 10 to 20 to 30 years, our Congress has functioned more like a parliament than an actual separate branch of government. And so whoever the president is, the people in Congress that support that president are happy to give away the power of Congress and let the president run roughshod over them. They only argue with the president's constitutional overreach when it's the president of the other party. And this doesn't work unless Congress is protective and jealous of its own power. But Article 1 is acting like Article none, and that's the problem here. And so the president figures, I will just do what I want and see if anybody can stop me, because the executive branch, and for that matter, the judicial branch, are the only branches of government that are not only protective of their own power, but willing to stretch the limits of it.
Well, there's one group that might want to stop him, at least for some of these programs, and it's the American people, Andrew. Talk to us about what is happening to Congress people on the Hill. With so many programs potentially, kind of hanging in the balance, or people afraid that they're not going to have the services that they depend on, are Congress people getting calls all day long?
Yeah, members of Congress that I talked to all day today, particularly in the Senate, which was in session today, of course, members of both parties were saying they were getting calls about this, emails about this. They were trying to sort of get clarifications from the administration, too, on what exactly was going to be impacted, which is what led the OMB to actually issue this, what really was a clarification memo earlier today after the initial guidance was leaked out last night. Because there was so much confusion, And it speaks to the frustration that Republicans especially have on Capitol Hill, which is that they feel like they get blindsided with these types of things, and then they have to go out and defend it, right? And they can't defend something if, number one, they disagree with it, obviously, but number two, they're not given any information about it on the front end, or at least a courtesy heads up that this is happening. So we kind of got some of these raw reactions sort of in the moment. Down in Florida, obviously, where House Republicans are right now, we saw a lot of reflexive defending of the president. But back here in Washington, where Senate Republicans are today, we heard some more messages of concern. For example, Senator Susan Collins, the top Senate Republican appropriator, told me today that this directive was, in her words, quote, far too sweeping. And so we're really getting those raw reactions in the moment from senators today. And that's partly because they really didn't get any heads up from the administration about this.
David Drucker, why wouldn't they get a heads up, right? They speak to the White House. They speak to Donald Trump all day, every day. Why wouldn't it be more coordinated than this?
I don't know, but why should it be? They're going to defend the president almost no matter what he does. And so I don't think the president felt the need to inform them, because if they got a heads up, their answer should be, that's great. We agree with this idea of spending less money, of conducting at least a temporary audit. But if Congress directed the executive branch to spend money, you've got to spend money. That's our power you're messing with. They're not going to do that. They're not going to say it. So I don't think the president really feels the need to give Republicans a heads up, because he knows that most Republican voters right now are with him, and therefore they are not going to challenge him. And I think it goes to, what Andrew talked about. It may have blindsided them, but what did they have to do? They had to figure out how to defend the president instead of saying, hold on a minute, I'm against this. I might agree with this in spirit because I want to see less spending, and I didn't agree with all of the Democratic spending that Joe Biden wanted that we had to do in a lot of these compromises. But a law is a law, and the president has to follow it. You're not going to hear any of that from them, most likely, and that's probably why, or among the many reasons why, he didn't give him a heads up, because it wasn't necessary.
I have a feeling you want to say something.
Yeah, David is exactly right with his political analysis. But the law requires a heads up. Under the Impoundment Act, if you are going to rescind or delay funds, you have to notify the Congress. And the Congress is run by John Thune in the Senate and Mike Johnson in the House. And nobody seems to care about that right now. I mean, what we're seeing right now is we have already seen, this is a president who is an oath breaker, who used violence to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power.
He did all those things, and then he was elected president.
He did all that, and then he was elected. And in his first week, he's decided to violate the Constitution by abandoning the 14th Amendment, by abandoning the Impoundment Act. And he is doing that as an affront to a Republican-controlled Congress. And a Republican-controlled Congress doesn't seem to care right now. So there is a way for Donald Trump to do this. There's a way for this administration to do this. He's not doing it in the normal ways. And what is violative of the constitutional and congressional prerogative here is that he is doing this with money that has already been appropriated by Republicans in the House of Representatives. And they don't seem to care.
Okay, so I want to play something that the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, who we all know from the first 4 years, I want to share what he said about this move.
OMB, led by Russ Vought, felt it was necessary to protect taxpayer resources to issue clearer guidance establishing for these discretionary grants of funding that are not directed by Congress, that they go through a political approval process.
Okay, Jeff Mason, help me. First of all, Russell Vought has not even been confirmed yet. So how is he leading this? And why is the money that has been appropriated by Congress, which David Jolly just said, is suddenly up for political approval process? I don't understand this.
Well, to your first question, Russ Vought, along with a lot of the people who ended up coming into the administration, and he will if he's confirmed, were part of the transition and part of the preparation process for exactly what we're seeing today. The multitude, according to Caroline Leavitt, more than 300 executive orders that the president has signed in his first 9 days in office were not just prepared since he got into office, and that applies to this as well. So Russ was almost certainly part of that, and was, of course, one of the designers of Project 2025. And this is being reflected, or a lot of those values are being reflected in these early actions that the president is taking. In terms of your second question, I think was on running things through a political lens. And the answer to that is that's how Donald Trump works. And that is absolutely at the core of what this administration does. And they're making no bones about it. Stephen Miller came over and talked to a few of us reporters on the White House driveway after his interview on CNN, and basically just sort of said, look, this is how government is supposed to run. These things are supposed to be done. The president is allowed to do these things, and this is how they're going to keep going. So I think, you said at the very beginning of the show, put your seatbelts on. This is just the beginning for the Trump 2.0 White House.
Yeah, I don't know if this is how the government is supposed to run, but it is certainly how it's running now. All right, new topic before I let you boys go. The Trump White House is now offering 2 million federal government workers a buyout. They could quit and get a severance package that's like about 8 months. Andrew, walk us through this, because it's almost reminiscent of Elon Musk when he first went to Twitter and he wrote that sort of manifesto to the company. This is the fork in the road. You're with me or not. What do we need to know about this?
Yeah, well, actually, Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, of course, he's got a lot of federal workers in his state. He was just on the Senate floor a few hours ago imploring federal workers to not buy into this, to not take this quote unquote buyout. He said it's not authorized. It's not legal. It's not something that Donald Trump can do. He had a line in which he said something like Donald Trump will stiff you in the end, just like he did to the contractors when he was a real estate developer in New York City. So you've got members of Congress that are actually saying that this is not a real thing, that this cannot actually happen, and like I mentioned, imploring federal workers, especially in states like Virginia, right outside of D.C., imploring federal workers to not fall for it, essentially.
David Drucker, your take?
Well, it's certainly a creative way to try and thin the federal workforce, and it's been a major goal of the president. It's something he campaigned on. I think the question is whether this runs afoul of civil service laws, right? I mean, there are federal employees that are politically appointed that serve at the pleasure of the president, and they can be fired or dismissed without cause. There are civil service employees, and this is a matter of statute, and you can't just fire them. I mean, you can try, and presidents like to stretch the bounds of executive power, this president especially, so they can give it a shot. But if these sorts of things do not run afoul of civil service laws, then it's something that the president has the right to do as he manages the federal workforce.